Now, this week, the Home Secretary, Alan Johnson, ruled that the computer hacker, Gary McKinnon, must be extradited to face trial in the United States. And this is despite a psychiatrist's report saying that Gary McKinnon, who suffers from Asperger's syndrome, is certain to kill himself if forced to go. Gary's mother, JANIS SHARP, is here with me now. JANIS, thanks very much for coming in. It's an extraordinary observation by a psychiatrist to make, wasn't it? And reflects, I'm sure you would say, the seriousness of the legal moves.
Absolutely. I can't understand why they've ruled against Gary at all. And they also don't take into consideration that he's had almost 8 years of living in heightened terror and fear. And you wouldn't do that to an animal, let alone to a person. But, sorry.
Let me put some questions to you,
Yep.
which some people may find rigorous, others offensive, potentially. If somebody's considered to be at a risk of suicide, there are measures that can be taken. Ultimately, people can be sectioned if they're at risk of suicide. Can that really be a defence in the eyes of law? We can't, you know, if everybody who faced legal prosecution threw up their hands and say, well, I'm in a delicate psychological state, we can't go any further, our legal system would be in paralysis. But
Gary isn't trying to avoid being prosecuted. Gary wants to be prosecuted in the UK, which is his right under the Magna Carta. When Gary committed the offence, he was in a dial-up connection. In 2002, he was arrested, and had they actually applied for the extradition then, he would have had prima facie evidence and could have contested the allegations of damage. Without damage, they couldn't have extradited. It wasn't an extraditable offence. Now, we fight for 28 days before we can make a charge. We have to charge within 28 days. Now, it makes a mockery of that when they allow the Americans to wait after indicting and after issuing an arrest warrant for 3 years before requesting the extradition. I mean, that is ludicrous.
One of your contentions, and the contentions made by Gary McKinnon's supporters, is that he was pursuing a sort of harmless obsession with UFOs. That doesn't sit comfortably with the sort of thing he left. For instance, this was a message he allegedly left on the US Defense Department computer. He said, US foreign policy is akin to government-sponsored terrorism these days. It was not a mistake that there was a huge security stand-down on September the 11th last year. I will continue to disrupt at the highest levels. I mean, that's not a harmless obsession with UFOs, is it?
Well, they know that he was looking for UFOs. It was on his computer. The thing that Gary believed that 9/11 was an inside job, rightly or wrongly, conspiracy theory or not. The reason Gary explained to his psychiatrist he believed that is when a plane flies off course, the fighter jets are meant to fly up, monitor the pilots, monitor the passengers if it's off course for 2 minutes. Now, the planes were flying off course for up to 4 hours, one heading towards the Pentagon.
That's another subject.
I have to explain Gary's message. It's important. He believed it was no accident, it was a stand down, because he believed that it was an inside job. His continued disruption was a cyber peace protest, leaving cyber notes saying your security is awful. He couldn't understand why there was no passwords and no firewalls and thousands of machines. That's accepted. But since then, we've had disclosure from the CPS at the last court hearing and from a computer expert, a professor who works for the police quite often, and he said the alleged damage, financial damage, was for security that the Pentagon should have had in the first place, basic firewalls that would have flagged up that someone was there. So they're kind of, in a sense, prosecuting the whistleblower. Gary did wrong.
Do you think he did them a favour?
Well, I think, would they rather a real terrorist had walked in and blown them to kingdom come? I mean, they had no firewalls and no passwords for years on end. How on earth could that be? But the thing is, he has never tried to avoid responsibility. Extradition is meant if you commit a crime and flee a country, they return you to that country. Gary has never left, he never leaves London, North London. He's never been there. It wasn't meant to take you from the land you were born in. It's a whole different thing. But also, someone hacked into the Pentagon from Romania, and last year they were sentenced to 8 months, no extradition request. Unfortunately, Gary, because he's naive, because he has Asperger's, he admitted without a lawyer to the computer misuse, but he has always denied the damage.
When was he diagnosed with Asperger's?
He was diagnosed about a year and a half ago.
Sometime after the prosecution was brought against him?
Yes, the reason being the World Health Organization didn't know about Asperger's until sort of 1995.
But how is it a specific defence against the charges he faced? I mean, for instance, if he'd committed a murder or some other wretched crime, how would that be a defence?
it's not a defence, it's a right to be kept here. Why should they be so determined to try and take him away? Gary doesn't travel, he doesn't fly, he's afraid to travel. To take someone and actually put them through that ordeal of being extradited when he could quite easily be tried in his own country. And the Americans have actually said that they think that our sentences are too lenient. Well, it's a totally different mindset. We have a sort of sense of humour about those things, and as far as the notes he left, we've got a long tradition of cyber peace protests. Greenpeace have actually done deliberate damage in order to bring attention to climate change, and they are actually acquitted at court, whereas America seems to see everything as terrorism. But Gary is clearly not a terrorist. There's also a man called Ian Norris who's getting extradited for price fixing, not for the terrorists that we were told this extradition treaty was to be for. But we should have equal rights. We should have probable cause so that we can also contest any allegations in this country. But his solicitor, Ben Cooper, Gary's one of the finest barristers in England, is putting in a judicial review next week of Alan Johnson's decision, and we are hoping that something will come of that.
JANIS Sharp, thanks for coming in and explaining that for us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.